Alright YouTube, it's time for the Occult Video 77, the Dystopia Utopia Misconception. Sort of this weird dichotomy where a lot of spiritual groups, they're either waiting for Armageddon, they're waiting for some darkness to befall mankind, the end of the world, the total doom and gloom situation, or those that for spiritual reasons they're awaiting some golden age in the future. Now, I always profess that if you want something done, do it yourself. If you're an idealist, if you want a golden age, you should be yourself striving to make that reality, sort of living vicariously and daydreaming all day about how great it would be if this happened or that happened does nothing. That's just a stand-in for actual action, which could be undertaken to make the world that way. That would be an aside as well. People who believe, oh, well, the world has fallen away from what it should be, things are terrible right now, we need like a worldwide awakening of consciousness. Well, it's not going to happen if you just sit there playing with your orgone generator. Any more than somebody who believes in like despair and hell and chaos magic. If you're just sort of sitting there in your robe drinking absinthe, you're not really accomplishing anything towards those ends. You have to couple belief and intent with action, otherwise nothing actually ends up coming about. Now, the misconception as far as dystopia and utopia goes sort of are twain within the Christian tradition. That is, if you read some of the materials from the early days of the Protestant movement, they discuss the concept of the white horse of conquest and sort of the revelation as being from their times. They declare that they were already in those revelatory times. Back then, King James himself, King James the First of England, states this explicitly within his own demonology. That is the sort of 3-book manuscript that I'm editing right now. Talks several times about the white horse of revelation. Oh yeah, the white horse has already gone a-riding, and the age of, spirits appearing visibly is over, so all these miracles and stuff that are actually witchcraft or something like that. And that was an opinion that prevailed at the time. Each successive generation of individuals that believes in sort of an Armageddon or end times looks for reasons to believe that they're in it now, I guess because of their own boredom and their own pessimism. And they apply these sort of beliefs and observations to the world around them. They say there's corruption, there's war, there's strife, there's misery. Therefore, we must be on the verge of destruction. We're on the eve of destruction. People who believe in nuclear war, they believe the same thing. They believe at all times we're literally on the brink. It's going to happen like in the next, 10 days or the next 10 years or something, without actually observing why it should be the case that that would happen. Now, I analyze things and I say because of the state of the world as it is today, we are more in danger of it than we have been since the Cuban Missile Crisis. I profess thus that it is fairly likely we will see such an event, but I don't claim to know that it'll happen. It could de-escalate. The world could fall back down into slumber, the Cold War could re-warm again, and things would be hunky-dory, maybe for the next 1,000 years for all I know. I just don't think that's quite as likely. But when people profess to know, it's, for instance, you look at the hippies, looking at the coming age of Aquarius. Or you look at the people in the wake of Donnelly and the antediluvian world, looking at the world around saying, well, we can redesign mankind, all this ancient technology, we'll find it, we'll replicate it, we'll go forward, we'll do all of these wonderful things. Whenever there is a prevailing essence of utopia, there is an undercurrent of dystopia and vice versa. For example, you look at those increasing numbers of people right now that are very pessimistic about mankind's odds of surviving the present, modern era unscathed without a major epidemic or some natural disaster or a nuclear war knocking us back to the Copper Age. There's an undercurrent of individuals, thus, that look at this and they say, well, that's not a bad thing. That's actually what we need now. The world is so strangulated, so densely populated, so controlled and regulated. Things are so bad that the only way to actually get anything good back off the ground is to burn everything to the ground and start building again. In a prevailing age of positivity, or among a prevalently positive group like the hippies or something, talking about the new age, crystals, and how the god and goddess are going to come back and enlighten us all, and the dimensions will shift and will be like, space alien Atlanteans and so forth. There's then an undercurrent that says, well, that doesn't sound very good. Maybe we should just let things collapse in order to build such a utopian society. So these two sort of polar regions of the human mind are constantly fighting with one another. It's like the debate within Christianity. Are the end times to be looked forward to, or are they something that you should strive to stave off in your ever-present struggle with Satan, to push aside, to trample the serpent, and so forth? And that debate, depending on which group within Christianity you ask, and which congregation and which individual you ask, you're going to get different answers. The fallacy, the folly of it, is that all of these idealistic groups, whether they're extremely optimistic about man's capability to sort of reach for the stars, create the Star Trek universe or Atlantis or something like that, or whether they're very negative and they say, well, mankind really, we should just fucking wipe ourselves out and go back to square one, and maybe we'll do it better the next time around. Most of these idealistic groups remain just idealistic groups. They don't take any physical, concrete steps towards attaining such goals, because most individual members of any social movement are very lazy. They don't want to get up off their butt and actually do anything. They want to think about it, they want to give it moral support, they'll even potentially give it financial support, but they won't take the actual initiative of attempting to organize anything. Most humans are very sloppy at organizing anyway. The most charismatic person on earth could be a total slob when it comes to actually getting things off the ground and suffer greatly as the result. Just like someone who is very well organized might be a complete shut-in hermit working from afar and never themselves really taking physical part in any of the activities of any of these sort of movements. This is the same for political and mainline religious movements as well. I would say looking forward to some antediluvian revelation whereby all sorts of cosmic beings come down and magically make the world better is not going to happen. Humans have to do that themselves. If you believe in the opposite, that humanity should essentially more or less wipe itself out, that the remnants, the survivors, in some way should then try again and try to forget all of this ever happened because they see it as so overwhelmingly negative. If they simply sit around and theorize about these things, it will never actually occur. Because other people in charge of actually doing things will not necessarily share their opinion. It's the same as within any organization that's trying to do something. You have poor organization, you have the plurality of people, usually the majority, unwilling to do anything substantial to work towards even a goal they generally feel strongly towards. Even the Bible itself, in a moment of startling wisdom, alludes to this, with Jesus' parable involving the seed that's cast onto different types of ground. This seed's cast among thorns, that seed's on sterile ground. This one is sown in good earth and watched over and yields 70-fold or 700-fold or something like that. There are plenty of people that feel very strongly about doing something, especially within spiritual terms, but when push comes to shove, ultimately they try to do as little as possible, if anything at all, and leave it to others. It is an ever-present problem. It's a present problem within the occult, too. You try to get like an occult meetup going, and 2 people end up showing up, if that, because people, oh yeah, it's a great idea, oh, I'd love to go to that, it'll be great. We can have speakers, we can have merchandise, we can have, philosophical discussions, orgy, whatever it happens to be. And when push comes to shove, most of them, even if they actively sort of reserve a spot for such an event, they never show up. This happens almost all the time. You're never going to get 100% attendance of what you believe. Very rarely you'll get more than that, only because of public exposure, protests, or something like that. There's a reason why they generally aren't organized in the country. So I think the Woodstock concert would be the best sort of new age hippie-ish example of something that went in the opposite direction. They had too many people to the point where the fences were dilapidated. They just started letting people in without paying. So they're like, oh, there's nothing we can do about it. No one will provide security. We can't do it ourselves, so just let everybody in. But no, I don't believe there's any coming glowing utopia. I do believe in the dystopian element insofar as I believe mankind is unfortunately fairly likely to knock himself back to the Copper Age. But I don't attach any significant divine importance to this. I just say it's man acting like a monkey, because that's where essentially more cognitively aware, somewhat less hairy apes. That's essentially what mankind is. According to that very secular tenet, it explains, generally speaking, why we act the way that we do. It explains it quite well, probably far better than any cosmological argument can. But it still should be shrouded in occult terms. This problem is present in every occult order. It's prominent among Satanists, pagans, whatever it happens to be. So that's a problem. And secondly, people, oftentimes, they're unwilling to actually work towards a better age or the destruction of mankind or something. You'd think of a mad scientist really just hates everyone, says, I'm going to take over the world, destroy everybody. Oh, but I'll do it tomorrow, and then procrastinates, grows old and crazy, and just ends up making a Franken woman that he can fuck instead. That's about all. Peace out.